You know, as a speaker, I always think when you come on stage, there's a danger that any time you could go blank and what you're going to say, your mind could just switch off and think, oh no. And as divers, I think we've got contingency plans for things. And my contingency plan, in case my mind goes blank, is I'm going to take my sock off and I'm going to turn it into a hand puppet and tell jokes. But on the grounds that we're here in Portugal, Sunshine State, it's like, oh, geez. So just to be on the safe side, I've brought it with me in my pocket, okay? Okay. You know, I've always said that we're living in the golden age of shipwreck discovery. And possibly what I mean by that is in a generation's time or two to come, these shipwrecks won't exist as we know them now. They would have biologically imploded and become nothing more than iron ore deposits on the seabed. So now for our generation has never been a better time to go and explore a shipwreck. Now's never been a better time to photograph a shipwreck. So with that said, I thought it was fitting that I would talk about a shipwreck today that I've been involved in the exploration of for the last 2.5 decades. And it's the biggest shipwreck that I've dived, and that is the Britannic. Sister ship to Titanic, and bigger than Titanic at 50,000 tons. She's the biggest ocean liner on the seabed. Okay, so she sank in the Great War. She was used as a hospital ship just to carry wounded soldiers back from the Dardanelles back to England. And she sank in November 1916, and she sank in the Aegean Sea, which is in the middle here. So if we can see here, we've got Greece and Turkey, and then we have that is not working. There we go. So we have Athens down here, and then we have the island of Lemnos at the top there, where she was on her way up here to collect wounded soldiers, bring her back through here, through the Aegean Sea, through the Kea Channel, and she sank around about here in the Kea Channel. Nobody knew at the time why she sank. It was a mystery. Okay, the wreck was discovered in 1976 by Jacques Cousteau. Cousteau happened to be in the area at the time looking for the lost city of Atlantis when the Titanic Historical Society tapped him up and asked him if he would go and look for Britannic, Titanic's sister ship. A great expedition, and he did actually find the wreck, and those guys first ever dived it. Okay, this is what he found. This is Ken Marshall's painting of the wreck. This is how he found Britannic on the seabed in 120 meters of water. Like I said, the biggest ocean liner on the seabed. And the only damage to the wreck is this break in the bow here, where she hit the seabed and then collapsed over. When we first went to the wreck, that was back in 1998. This is the kind of equipment that we were using. By the mid-90s, we were diving literally hundreds of shipwrecks, and it was all on open circuit back in those days. You can see me and my dive partner here. We've got twin 20-litre cylinders. We've got the 15-litre side mounts. And back in the 90s, that was a big dive to make. People always used to say to us, well, how on earth did you get in the water? Well, we called it the gravity-assisted, just launch yourself in method. And there is my dive partner just launching himself in with the big Aquaset. I'm on my way up the ladder behind him, and I've got a camera phone into the equation as well. I'm half his size. Okay, on that particular expedition back in 1998, John Chatterton was the first person to use a rebreather. This is the Aura CCR 2000. Not very practical for the time. They hadn't really come of age at the time. This thing went down on him inside the wreck, giving him no reading, so he had no idea what he was breathing at all. Okay, a couple of photographs now from that expedition. Not the greatest photos, but brilliant at the time. Photos from a friend of mine, Rob Royal. There's myself just cruising across that break. You can see the bridge in the background. Why am I having trouble with my clicker? And this is a picture. The only reason I put this picture in this presentation this afternoon is because this is kind of time stamped. You've got two divers here, and they're both on open circuit, something you just don't see on deep shipwrecks anymore. Okay, let me just see if that works. That's not working either. Yes, it is. Okay, so we returned to the wreck in 2003, and by this time we're all on rebreathers, and technology is catching up. This is one of the significant things that we discovered on that project. It's the Marconi radio. Why am I having problems? Okay, so here's the Marconi, and what's so significant about this is because this is the same device that sent the SOS from the Titanic, but they never found the one on Titanic, and this is the only one that they know in existence that exists. So if we bring in a little bit of CGI, we can see what that would have looked like back in its day. And then a picture taken in recently, 2021, of that instrument still in the wreck. So I talked about wrecks collapsing and falling away. Look at the room that it was in. It started to collapse away. They didn't know how Britannic sank. It was always said, the Germans always said they would have never attacked a ship that was protected by the Geneva Convention. It was a hospital ship. Passengers on board swore blind that the ship was hit by a torpedo. They said the Germans never said they'd put a torpedo. They always said that they had laid a minefield. So we went to look for that minefield, and that minefield was laid by this submarine here, U-73. And we did actually find that minefield exactly where the Germans said that they had laid it. And this is the team that found it with the sonar equipment on that particular expedition. We actually found out why the ship sank and why she sank so quick on that expedition, 3 times faster than her sister ship, Titanic. So it was the most successful trip that's ever been to the wreck. 2006, we returned. This time we're filming for the History Channel. The last expedition was National Geographic. And by this time, it's all about the science. And we're using test forms that we're putting on the wreck. And we're putting these instruments inside the engine rooms and places like that to test the pH levels, the oxygen levels, and all these test platforms here. And if we look at this next one, these were planted on the wreck and left for a number of years. When they're recovered, the microbiologists are able to study the different metals that are in this test platform and work out how long these ships are going to last before they deteriorate and collapse away. I think Titanic is something like 90 years before she biologically implodes. Okay, by 2009, we returned back to the wreck with a big master plan. This time it was a much, much bigger plan. And again, we're filming for National Geographic Television. The boats have got bigger. You can see here the television crew following us, and the guys just being launched in the water with cranes. Massive project this was going to be. And we were going to explore deep inside the wreck, the Turkish baths, the swimming pool, things like this. And this was for a 2-hour documentary that was going to kick off expeditions, a season of expedition programming with National Geographic. And it was going to be tied in live with Bob Ballard on Titanic at the time. So if we look at some of the camera systems that we were using, these were huge, high-definition camera systems. You can see Evan Kovacs here filming with one of those. That's not just all camera, guys. That is battery packs to power all those lights, and the buoyancy devices all are wrapped around it. And we can see here as well, those cameras were tethered to the surface. So all we had to do as divers was just move them around in the water and get the big panoramic shots, while the surface team would do all the proper work with the cameras and record all the images. See here over on the left-hand side, you can see here, this is one of the 3D cameras. All that is 2 cameras next to each other, 57 millimeters apart, which is exactly the distance of your eyes, which is how they make the 3D. It's all very simple. One of the other things that we've been doing over the years as well as a team It's penetrating inside the boiler rooms and the engine rooms. And there's a reason for this, is because Britannic sank 3 times faster than Titanic, when in theory she was unsinkable. And because Titanic sank so fast, the bulkheads, the water filled up each compartment, went over, and before long, she was just sinking. But with Britannic, the bulkheads were built right to the top. So in theory, if 1 or 2 of these were flooded, she could still remain afloat. And one of the questions was, in between these bulkheads are these watertight doors. So over the years, we've been exploring deep inside the wreck, and the wreck lies at 120 meters. So these explorations are around about 110 meters. And we're going through to find these watertight doors. Now, in 2003, Richard Stevenson found the watertight door open. He penetrated into that boiler room. But the engineers then, the marine engineers, said it's possible that she could have still remained afloat with 1 compartment flooded. So it was a case of then working our way through the boiler rooms to find the next compartment, that the next watertight door as such. This is so you've got a CGI picture on the left-hand side. This picture is just taken from a head cam of one of the divers penetrating deep inside the wreck. And so don't forget the wreck's on its side, so it becomes disorientated. If we have a look at this picture here, we can see that area there. Here's the fireman's tunnel. So we will penetrate here, deep inside here, find our way through these bulkheads, find the watertight door, weave our way through the engine rooms and through there. Quite a dangerous dive at the time, and that was being conducted by Richie Stevenson and Richie Kohler. In '98, Chatterton was in here on his rebreather when the thing went completely down and gave him no readout at all. There's a picture, just shows you again inside there what it's like. And we did get inside those boiler rooms, and the guys did find the watertight doors open. So we can categorically state that when she sank, when she hit the mine as such, she filled up with water so quick because the watertight doors were actually open. Here we have one of the furnace things here. And we can actually see there in the boiler room, this is a recent photograph that was taken deep inside that engine room as such, into the boiler room. By 2015, 2016, we returned to the wreck, and again with a bigger, more ambitious project to film deep inside. We got permits to go inside, but this time we come back with the U-boat Navigator, a Russian-owned vessel. And on board this vessel, we had the access to submarines and a lot more multi-million dollars worth of equipment to explore that wreck with. One of the things that we did have was the Triton submersible, and that was able to follow the divers around and film the divers on the outside of the wreck, and particularly light it up with the big lighting systems that it had. Looking down inside one of the Triton submersibles here, this is the room that we get, this instrumentation. This is the gimbal that the big cameras would sit on, and the pilot would operate it here. Put the divers in there as well, and you can see there's not a great deal of room, and they would probably spend 5 or 6 hours down there on the wreck, exploring the wreck. So the divers would be down between 45 minutes and an hour maximum, probably 45 minutes at our age now, and then the divers would continue filming in there. We also had the use of the one-man minimal displacement submarine that the Russians used as well. And these two could work in unison together to get some really good footage of the wreck. We also had access to a diving bell, which we could put into the water. We lowered this down onto the wreck around about 80 meters on top of the wreck. And then at any time we could come back to that. And we had contingency plans for bailouts with all our gas on the side of these on the side of this bell. And we could also communicate with the surface topside team. And I will say having a bell on site was pretty cool to get inside there and just talk to other divers. There's probably room for a couple of divers in there, but the great thing about having the bell was there was piped music from the surface. You could sit and eat your sushi or your sandwiches, or in my case, I mean, I love chocolate, so it was loads of chocolate on decompression. You just can't go wrong. It was like living in a fantasy world. So I'm just going to showcase Britannic now. I'm just going to take you for a tour around the wreck underwater, using some photographs as well by my good friends that have explored that wreck with me over the years. So as the two submersibles move in, we're going to follow the divers around the wreck, and the Russians are going to film it with the big Red Epic camera for a multi-million-pound documentary that we made. The last documentary we made on this expedition was for the BBC. So we're going to start at the bow. I'm going to take you all the way to the stern. This is the bow section of the wreck. Now, when Britannic sank, she was 1,000 feet long, and she sunk in 400 feet of water. When she sunk, the bow is actually on the seabed first, and the stern is still out of the water with the propeller still going. And because the sheer weight, the whole thing's collapsed down. That's what's caused that break that we saw. And in turn, it's crumpled all the metal either side of that. The noise must have been astronomical. Nothing really screams Titanic other than the bow of Britannic, of these massive ocean, these Olympic class ocean liners, and these huge chains and things that we see there. See the displacement submarine there, just lighting up one of those huge capstans. These are absolutely massive. And when you get on this wreck and you scooter across that, it really is atmospheric. If we bring in the archive picture, we can have a look at that and get some idea of what that area looked like. We're going to move up to the bridge in a minute, but before we do that, we're going to have a look inside the wreck itself. So this is the anchor on the side here. And on the side, remember that picture I showed you earlier from the 90s? The same area, the same crane, submarine just lighting that area up, gives you an idea of what that's like at the front there. But deep inside the wreck is this is a spiral staircase that I found around about 110 meters. And this would have been used by the firemen, the people, that the guys that stoked the boilers, that kept the boilers and the fires going inside there. Going down this spiral staircase leads to other levels and other staircases and lower deck levels. These guys, paying passengers, would have never have seen these or used these particular staircases. Now, of course, we couldn't get down there with all our technical diving equipment on. I found a ventilation shaft which I could drop down and furthermore photograph these staircases and things. There's another one actually on the left-hand side here that we can just see in the corner of that photograph. Further down still, the spiral staircases disappear and they become smaller ladders and compartments. You can see how much marine growth is on there. And those guys, you know, working in those furnaces, in those boiler rooms, everywhere you go inside Britannic, there's these water fountains that those guys would have drank from as such. In the bow section of the wreck, we can still see capstans still inside the bow that they would have used to rotate and bring things up inside these huge cargo hatches as such, where they drop cargo down. And in here, this photo, I've turned it around on its side. It was actually on its side because the wreck's on its side. In here, there's a little workshop behind here, loads of tools and things that had all fallen across the workshop floor as the thing sunk and gone deep on the seabed. Britannic is absolutely and utterly covered in marine growth, to the point where sometimes you can't identify what a lot of things are. This is one of the navigational lamps that we can see there. Here's an artifact. This is not the one off Britannic, but this is very similar. Gives you an idea of what that artifact would have looked like. So this is the brake area that the submersible's lighting up here. That's the bit that broke off that we can see, and that gives us access through here to the fireman's passage and in deep into that boiler room as such. This is the bridge section of the wreck, and looking at this photograph here, on top of the bridge there would have been a wooden structure, the whole top of but that's long since rotted away, dropped away. And up here we can see this is the areas that would go to the covered promenade decks where those people would have walked from the bow all the way covered to the stern of this massive Olympic class liner. Inside the bridge, this is what we would have had, these big square windows as such, the massive 21-inch telegraphs, and even the helm. And a lot of these things can still be seen on the wreck today, but as I say, collapsing away. On the left-hand side there, we can see the helm steering position, but the wooden wheel is long since rotted away. Cousteau brought up the bronze plaque that was around it, the brass plaque that was around it. This is one of those windows, a photograph taken in the 90s, that has collapsed down from that bridge that's just hanging there now, suspended as such. The diver here, we can see the port bridge wing at the top corner there. Top of that is around about 80 meters. It's around about 100 meters here. Divers just lighting up one of the telegraphs that is hidden amongst the wreck there. As I said to you, covered in marine growth as such. These would have been the instruments that would have sent the commands to the engine room, fast forward, stern, whatever it may be. Okay, the boys are going to bring the submersibles in now, and we're going to look into the bridge area a little bit more closer. So as I said, there's those promenade decks that lead all the way to the end of the wreck as such. And then this is that port bridge wing. So these guys would have been in this area here, commanding this ship. And when they docked the ship, they would have gone up to there to bring them close into these massive ports. If we bring in this picture here, we can see a diagram of that area. And then behind this area was the captain's personal quarters. So Captain Bartlett's quarters would have been over this side, and there's reminiscence of that still in there today. We can see the captain's bath in there. Closer picture that was taken in the 90s here. And we can see an arrangement of 4 different taps. 2 of these would have been for fresh water and 2 would have been for salt water. So those guys would have bathed actually in salt water. My little girl always said that the reason that this ship sank is because somebody left the plug in and the bath overflowed. Another here we go, another picture there taken of that bath, and you can see the structure and everything that's started to collapse and fall away. And like I said to you, now has never been a better time to go and photograph these huge shipwrecks. The whole side of Britannic is one monstrous man-made reef. And like Cousteau once said in his documentary, it's like being a flea on an elephant's back. It's that big. Words can't describe how big this wreck is. And in the background, we can see these huge davits that launch those lifeboats as such. The Triton submersible here, just following one of the divers down across the wreck. And inside these promenade decks would have been where the wounded soldiers would have been treated by the hospital staff. We can see in that photograph there, the divers just going across the top. Now, that's what it would have looked like back in the day, had it been, you know, a passenger ship. But this is what it truly looked like. And these drapes coming down would have given each patient a degree of privacy. And the outside of the ship would have been reserved for the high-ranking officers that were injured coming back. But the remainder of the troops would have been inside the ship where it had been a lot hotter. So a little plaque that was laid by my friend Kevin Gurr on the wreck in memory of a true pioneer, Jacques Cousteau, who dived this wreck on open circuit mixed gas in 1976. Okay, so this is the open boat deck. So this is the there would have been boats, ships on the lifeboats along here, and those Edwardian people would have walked down there in the grand days. But if we bring in this next picture here, we can see that area again, a bit further expanse. And we can see these windows here, and we can see doorways. This doorway leads to the Marconi radio room, that radio room that would have sent messages back. And then the next doorway along led to the grand staircase, which is long since collapsed away. But because the wreck's lying on its side, we don't get any degree of perspective. So if we turn that image on its side, it will give us a better idea of what that looked like. Okay, so our diver wouldn't be swimming on its side either, would he? Let's make our diver swim on its side there. Okay, that's better. Yeah, better. Okay. So yeah, as I say, this is what it would have, this is where the boats would have been and everything like that. So this is on Britannic, and exactly the same spot, a photograph taken on Titanic. But the difference in this photograph is, unlike Britannic, we can see the expansion joints. The whole ship was put together in sections. And Titanic's starting to collapse away as a result of that. But the marine life on the side of Britannic is preserving the wreck for a long time. And then a photograph of what that area would have looked like. Oh, I skipped to there when it was being built. These are the huge davits that I talked about. Because of the Titanic disaster, Britannic was built with a lot more lifeboats. There was not enough lifeboats on Titanic, as we all know. So they were built, Britannic was built a lot bigger with safety in mind. But the amount of lifeboats were on, they needed these massive davits to actually maneuver those boats, those lifeboats across a ship that was keeling over and into the sea as such. We can see two guys down here sitting up, so you can see how big these are. Evans in the submersible there at the bottom, looking up at one of them, and we can get an idea of scale with one of the divers next to one of those there. Again, this is what it looks like inside Britannic. I've got my back to where the grand staircase would have been. So I'm in this kind of area just here. The staircase would have been behind me. That is long since rotted and fallen away as such. It's just one big void that you just drop down inside now. Okay, this is the fourth funnel as such. The submarine's just lighting up inside there. This would have been a fake funnel. It would have not done anything. On these old ships, they put 4 funnels on. They put a 4th one on just to make it look more grandeur and bigger and better than any other vessel that belonged to any other company as such. Moving up to the stern and the towards the end of the presentation now, the stern is really, really massive. It really is proper good. And it's like, this is the stern poop deck as such. And there would have been again a little cabin on here where there would have been instrumentation that's now fallen to the seabed. If we bring that in, we can see what that area would have looked like. And that whole counter stern overhangs. So you would have never seen the propellers if you looked over the back. It's like that fit, you know, when you see Titanic and the movie at the back, they're just looking over. And you can get some idea of the scale there. And the propellers are in the background there. When I first went to the wreck in the 90s, I said to myself, could I get a photograph that would best describe how big this wreck is? And the answer is no, I couldn't. It's virtually impossible to do that. And back when this ship was being built, those guys thought exactly the same. And I saw these pictures of them standing near the props, and that's the only thing that gives you any idea of perspective. So that's the only way I could best describe the size of this wreck. So I'm taking, I've got my this photograph was taken, these photographs were taken 2 decades ago now on film. I've got my tripod set up actually on the rudder, 110 meters depth, and I'm shooting time exposure photographs of those, of my friend Richie Stevenson there, giving scale to that propeller there. Really is massive. Another photograph there, I think one of Pete Mesley's there. And then again, putting the divers in the frame, give you some sort of scale of how big this wreck really is. Picture you don't see very often. You normally see pictures of the top propeller, but the submarine's lighting up the one at the bottom there. 3 massive propellers on this particular ship. And my friend Richie Kohler there, just looking through the submersible glass sphere there, filming that for the television with the Red Epic camera. And the only people that died on Britannic were the hospital staff that actually made it into the lifeboats. But as the ship, as I said, came up out of the water, the propellers were still going, and the force sucked a number of lifeboats into them and chopped these people up. Really sad way to lose your life. Love this photograph. This is me on my inspiration rebreather, taking a photograph of that propeller, and I have millions of dollars worth of equipment lighting me up and giving that fantastic science fiction effect. The divers appear in the frame as well, and we're making a documentary, and the guys are laying a White Star flag on that propeller as such. So look, we've made numerous documentaries over the years, and they still crop up on the History Channel, Discovery, Channel 4, graphic, things like that. Look out for me and my mates on the television. I'm going to leave you with one thought. It's now 2022. Those ships, Titanic and Britannic, sank over 100 years ago. But what would it look like if those ships sank now? Well, this is my thought. Am I right, aren't I? Yeah. Guys, look, I can't do this on my own. These things are a team effort, and I'm thankful to my friends over the years. And of course, the companies that have supported me and my friends to actually go and achieve what we've achieved. I've been Leigh Bishop, you've been the audience. Thank you very much.